Hey there, it's Michelle, and I want to share with you something today that I think can have probably one of the biggest impacts on your mood and your mental health of all of the things that we really could do or talk about in order to support your mood and your brain health. And that is really dialing in your diet, right? Your food. And there's a lot of noise out there today about diet, about how to eat to be healthy. Some people say you should eat a keto diet, a carnivore diet. There's the vegan diet, right? There are so many different diets and different opinions about how we should eat to be healthy. It gets really confusing. I find a lot of the women I work with feel a lot of confusion around this topic. And I was like to simplify this for them. And one of the places I have always started with and look at is how were our ancestors eating for thousands of years in order to maintain healthy bodies and healthy minds? And so let's explore this topic of the ancestral diet approach to supporting our health, our mood, our mental health, our brain health, because I find this topic really fascinating. Maybe it's just my interest in traditional herbal medicine and how our ancestors used herbs and foods in order to support their health. I think we can learn so much from these really simple, more traditional approaches to healing and to our health and our diet than some of the really fancy diets and other techniques that are really promoted today that I think just add a lot of noise to and confusion to this topic of how to eat. So, one of the ways that we know how traditional diets have helped support health for thousands of years and more what we call traditional societies is through the work of researchers like Dr. Weston Price, who was actually a dentist. And around the 1930s, 40s, he started to notice something. He noticed that his patients, his dental patients, who, were typical Americans, were presenting with a lot of dental cavities, narrow dental arches, and he started to explore this topic and he actually ended up traveling around the world to visit some of these more traditional societies that were still living in their more traditional lifestyle, and their diets were more traditional, or I like the word ancestral, and tied to how people have been eating for, again, thousands of years, right? Before the advent of processed foods and refined foods that we have a lot of today, right? And so he visited traditional cultures like the Maasai. He had visited some traditional cultures in Europe, even, as well as the Aboriginal societies in Australia, for instance. And he noticed something really interesting. He noticed that when these societies were maintaining their ancestral diets, and we'll talk about what those diets looked like here in a few minutes, but he noticed that the people who were maintaining that ancestral eating pattern were really healthy and free of some of the more common health issues and diseases of modern people eating a more processed modern diet. They didn't have the dental cavities, the acne. They didn't have chronic health issues like arthritis or cardiovascular diseases that are so prevalent in societies today. And so he really started to study the diets of these traditional societies eating a more ancestral diet. He found some things really interesting. He actually did some really valuable research on what these societies were eating. And he found that basically their diets compared to the modern diet is very nutrient dense, right? They were getting such a higher degree, so many more nutrients in their diet than this nutrient depleted processed diet that many people were eating in the modern world. And their diets were full of antioxidants, minerals in bioavailable forms, plenty of fat soluble vitamins in the correct ratios, and plenty of fiber. A lot of these things that, again, our modern diets are really deficient in. And I think this is a really exciting key to supporting our overall health, but as well our brain health, our cognition, our ability to age well and to keep and maintain our brain health over our lifespan. So, what exactly was this traditional diet? Well, of course, Dr. Price, he traveled around the world, and in these different areas of the world, people were eating different types of foods, but there were some principles here that really were kind of ubiquitous throughout these different societies. They were, again, eating lots of nutrient dense diet foods, things like liver and other organ meats that were really high in, again, our fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, B vitamins, minerals like iron, copper, zinc. And they were eating a lot of these types of foods. So, really high quality animal foods were actually an important part of all of these different societies and their traditional diets. And things like liver or other organ meats were actually a highly prized part of the diet because they recognized how how healthy these foods were, how important they were in the diet for maintaining health. A lot of times, these were considered the superfoods, if you will, that were reserved for maybe the elderly, the frail, the ill, or pregnant women, nursing women were given preference in receiving these really nutrient dense, highly valued foods within these societies. Things like cod liver oil, for example, or high quality dairy products that were unprocessed. These were really important foods that help protect the body with all of those, again, bioavailable nutrients and fat soluble vitamins like vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin E in some cases, although mostly that comes from plants as well. And again, they were really high in minerals. And I think this is a big missing piece in our modern diet as well. We're not getting good quality bioavailable minerals in the diet in the same way that our ancestors were and these traditional societies were. And so, a lot of the foods that were really mineral rich were even things like our mineral rich herbs like nettles, alfalfa, sesame seeds. And that brings me to another point. The way that foods were prepared in these traditional societies was really important. So, for instance, they ate grains in traditional societies, but they were very careful to prepare those grains in a way that made the nutrients in grains more bioavailable. So, for instance, grains have something called lectins that make them hard to digest. And lectins can bind to minerals. So, this can be another reason why we can be deficient if we're eating a lot of grains that are high in lectins and binding to minerals, right? They're stealing the minerals from our body. But there are ways we can prepare grains in order to make them more bioavailable. And that looks like soaking, sprouting, or fermenting grains. So, a sourdough bread, for instance, is more easy to digest. The nutrients are more bioavailable for for someone than if we don't do any of these processes to grains. So a couple of clues here, right? Things that were considered really nutrient dense foods. There weren't any processed foods. There was no processed sugars or processed grains in many cases, right? They ate these grains processed, fermented, sprouted, but not turned into white flours or white sugar. Those foods were virtually unheard of. And they're some of the most detrimental to our health, and of course, some of the most addictive foods in our society as well. And they ate a lot of good quality fats, right? Animal fats. They weren't eating a lot of the vegetable oils that are really common in our society, things like corn oil or soybean oil, right? Those were not used, and those oils are really detrimental to our health. And so we want to be eating more high quality, just, beef liver is going to be a good source of healthy fat. Just animal fats in general are actually considered really high quality fats. Those saturated fats in animal products actually have a protective effect on the brain. Now, we want to make sure we're balancing that with other types of fat. So things like olive oil, avocados, fish, right? Our cold water fatty fish that provide omega-3 fats, our cod liver oil will provide that as well. And there's one more type of food I want to mention that our ancestors prioritized as well, and that was fermented foods, right? So they would ferment vegetables, or when we talked about sourdough bread, that's a type of fermentation of grains. And these were considered really valuable foods as well. We know they have a protective uh, component to protecting the gut and providing replenishing keystone bacterial species in the gut to help balance out that gut microbiome. And so a lot of nutrient dense whole foods in our ancestral diets, lots of quality animal products, quality fatty fish, cooked vegetables. Most vegetables were actually cooked in these societies, which I think is interesting. We live in a society where we think of raw vegetables and fruits as being healthy, right? Salads, maybe smoothies with our greens mixed in. But when we cook these vegetables, especially leafy greens like kale or chard, we actually make them easier to digest. And so ideally, I prefer that we're cooking our vegetables whenever we can. Not to say we can never have a salad here and there, but if we're eating a lot of raw vegetables, whether that's in salads or other ways, smoothies, then that can actually be more draining, depleting to our energy and make it more difficult to digest our food, which is an important principle of assimilating these nutrients from these really high quality diets. And then when we add on top of these really nutrient dense foods, herbal support, right? Every traditional society had their own herbal tradition, right? We know traditional Chinese medicine dates back thousands and thousands of years, as does Ayurvedic medicine. And Indigenous Americans used herbal formulations in order to support their health. And so adding our herbal support for brain health on top of a high quality ancestral diet is one of my favorite places to start in just supporting our mood, our mental health. And a couple of ways that I do this, just to give you an idea of where to start, some things I've already alluded to would be cod liver oil, right? I take cod liver oil most days, a teaspoon of cod liver oil to get plenty of vitamin A, D as well in the right ratios. Beef liver, if you don't love beef liver, you can take it as a capsule, right? You can find it in supplement form. That might be easiest for some of us who are more used to eating a modern diet and not used to eating some of those strange liver or other organ meats. And then minerals, right? Where can we get a lot of those minerals? I already mentioned a lot of mineral rich herbs. One way I like to get magnesium is to use a magnesium spray, right? Then these are made from the sea minerals, right, that we can actually absorb through the skin. So I spray on some magnesium spray every morning after I get out of the shower to just increase my magnesium levels. And then, yeah, eating more fermented foods, something like kimchi or sauerkraut are good places to start. Also taking a really good quality spore-based probiotic can be helpful here because of the way our modern diets are shaped and are there other factors I won't go into right now. but many of us have a depleted gut microbiome. And so spore-based probiotics can really help to rebuild that gut bacteria, which our ancestors would have been getting from the foods they were eating right in the wild as they were picking foods from their gardens or in the wild. They would have been getting these spore-based probiotics as part of the package of these natural foods. And so sometimes we can rely even just on a good quality spore-based probiotic to do that. So that is where I want to see my clients starting with really working to support a nutrient dense traditional foods diet that's really going to bring in some of the most nutrient dense healing foods and going to make a huge impact on our blood sugar levels, our mood, our mental health, our cognition, right? Our brain function. So try out some of these foods this week. Maybe bring in some fermented foods. Maybe try some beef liver or get some beef liver capsules to get started and see what happens. Notice if you have a little bit more capacity, energy, mental acuity as you start introducing more of these natural foods into your diet. I'll see you next time.